so I'm going to move you away from shipwrecks and to the submerged landscapes and just talk a little bit, very briefly. I promise I won't keep you long because my stomach's rumbling, as I'm sure yours are. And just say a little bit about the work we've been doing in Cardigan Bay, because of course the submerged landscapes was highlighted in Liverpool Bay and down off the Welsh coast in the southwest coast, but that project never looked at Cardigan Bay for a number of reasons. That there isn't the data, the seismic data there, and so it remains a bit of a blank, to be honest, which is sort of interesting because it was a focus of much research in Aberystwyth in the geology department in the 1960s and 1970s when they had their own vessel there, but it sort of slipped out of focus since then. So my involvement largely stemmed from work at Borth, which dates back all the way to when I was a child, when I first encountered the forest. And we've seen the antlers before, but they obviously have been a sort of a stepping stone to merging the sort of academic with the public. And we had a very successful short project called Layers in the Landscape a few years ago, which drew on the inspiration of the antlers to draw musicians, poets, artists, and all together to come up with their own concepts of what the submerged forest actually meant. But I'm not going to talk about any of that sort of stuff. I'm going to focus on ongoing work that's actually taking place at the present time. We have a short 18-month project going at the moment called Portalis, which is in its early stages. It's only just got off the ground. It's only essentially 12 months in the field, but it's looking at the archaeology of Cardigan Bay, the Mesolithic and the Neolithic archaeology, particularly with a focus on Ceredigion, which there's very little, I mean, there's a bit of known Mesolithic archaeology there, a bit more Neolithic archaeology there, but in comparison to, say, Pembrokeshire, it's rather poorly understood. And so we want to think about the archaeology of these periods and the archaeology of Cardigan Bay. And also it's linked to equivalent work going on the Irish coast in the Waterford estuary. And of course, it all comes back to the onshore expression of that, which is the submerged forest at Borth and the sediments beneath the submerged forest at Borth. It also is reflected in work on Vince Gaffney's Doggerland project, because as part of that, although we were focused primarily on the southern North Sea, we were able to utilise the Irish Geological Survey vessel to come into Cardigan Bay and undertake some geophysics in this area between Llanrusted and Aberaeron and Newquay down there in the deep, the lows the fishermen call the trawling ground. And so we've shot some new geophysics there in order to contextualize what's going on out in the bay. Of course, one of the things we're lacking largely in Cardigan Bay is a robust sea level curve. We don't have that many dated sea level points for Cardigan Bay, so we have to using sea level curves from other places when we're trying to reconstruct the landscape and the topographic change. So that's one of the key things that we need to be thinking about is getting accurate and robust sea level indicator points for Cardigan Bay. But there is some data out there, and data is in the British Geological Survey archives, boreholes, and here you can see some selected boreholes from the Cardigan Bay area. This is all part of work that there's a paper in Vince Gaffney's second volume of the sixth volume, I think it is, North Sea Project. And we've got a paper that particularly focuses on Cardigan Bay, where we've looked at historic data. And here you can see one of the transects. This is the Aeron transect coming in across here. And we have a tripartite sequence out in the bay with 2 tills separated by sands, which might or might not be the last interglacial. And this is largely based on work undertaken by staff and students at the geology department in Aberystwyth. We have one dated sequence out in Cardigan Bay, and that's just here off Aberystwyth, borehole ZZ27, and that's the only dated sequence from Cardigan Bay. So we're running on a very limited data set. Of course, we have some data points around the coast associated with the submerged forests. So that's the borehole, an uncalibrated date there of 8,740 from a peat deposit in a valley running up parallel to the coast, the Trawling Ground Valley. So as part of Vince's project and the work that we were able to undertake with the Irish survey vessel, we've got some new geophysics in the valley associated with this single borehole. That borehole is probably somewhere out here. This is a subject of another paper in that same volume. Again, we haven't unfortunately got any cores through any of this. We did try coring, but the vessel wasn't really up to doing any coring. So we've simply got the seismic data and the bits of borehole data from the previous work. But we are seeing quite a complex valley system stratigraphy off here, and I haven't got time to go into that there. So we've attempted to reconstruct the paleogeography for the pre-inundation landscape of Cardigan Bay. We've used the bathymetry. We've had to strip out some of the bathymetry where we've got infilled sequences. So we know that some of these valleys up here have got quite a lot of sediments down here this is the trawling grounds here. This is the course probably of the Ystwyth and the Ystwyth and the Rheidol coming down across here. The borehole that we've got is in this here, and we've got quite a lot of sediment in the bottom end of this valley. So we've had to strip out sediment up the valleys in order to approximate the topography of this system. We also think that the uplift rates and the uplift story up here is different to down here. So we can't simply apply a single model for creating this bathymetry. We have to apply at least 2 models. And this is being work done by a PhD student in the University of St Andrews to get this. So that's the landscape we think around about the early, the late glacial. So this is our best reconstruction. These are calibrated years as to what the geography looked like as we move through from 11,000 to 6,000 years ago. And clearly these are models and they need to be tested. And that's one thing that we would like to be able to do in the near future. It's important because we're also thinking about on-land sites. We have a really important Mesolithic site here in Aberystwyth that was excavated in the 1920s. Clark considered using this site as one of the type sites for the Mesolithic when he was writing his book in the late 20s, early 30s. It's not really been looked at ever since. It's got both early and late Mesolithic attributes as far as we know, and the advantage of what we've been doing out in Cardigan Bay is it forces us into a think about what that topographic change during the lifespan of that site actually looked like. And I'm not suggesting site catchment analysis here with the red circle around here, but this is a 20-kilometer buffer around the site, and just showing its relationship to the coast in the early Mesolithic versus in the late Mesolithic. So when we think about the site here, this is our best guess cartoon of what these landscapes might have looked like in the early Mesolithic, with our borehole here on the edge of this tidal estuary stretching all the way up to Aberystwyth during the early occupation. And that's the site for any of you that know the entrance to Aberystwyth harbour. So that's where we are with this work. We haven't finished the survey of the trawling grounds. We got to about here. We want to come up into this area here and see what happens as it's come to Aberystwyth. And obviously, we also need to understand what's happening up here with the Dyfi. The Portalis project, this Welsh Island project, is going to give us not any more data from offshore, but we are for the first time going to drill a borehole at Bore here, all the way down to the Pleistocene gravel. So I'm particularly hopeful we're going to get the transition, the transgression, and the flooding of the Dyfi, which obviously being one of the biggest rivers might give us a better understanding of when marine waters actually started to creep up the Dyfi and what this landscape looked like in this sort of scenario of the early Mesolithic that I'm talking about here. I mean, I think in terms of the sort of work we're doing in Cardigan Bay, you know, there isn't the big oil and gas data sets for the 3D seismics that Simon Fitch has been working on. So it's always going to be a much more piecemeal approach to these areas. It's also a special area of conservation, but we need to somehow find the way to ground truth some of this sort of model, to take our seismics and at least trying to get a few cores into these sequences to better understand these landscapes off the Welsh coast. Okay, I think that's probably enough. Yep, bang on 7 o'clock. So I'll stop sharing that.